Very often today we can hear statements like Islam means peace and the religion of Islam is the religion of peace, and we are so used to it that we accept these statements uncritically without even asking some questions which are worthy of being asked. Not much about Islam, but about ourselves. What do these statements that Islam means peace, what do these statements tell us about ourselves? When we say Islam is the religion of peace, it's actually not much an affirmation, rather it's the rejection and denial. Denial that Islam is the religion of war and that Islam somehow supports terrorism. And essentially it is a denial of those terrorist acts who were done by Muslims who said that they do it in the name of Islam. And the truth is that Islam today is not in a state of war with the rest of the world. For one simple reason. Islam today is not an entity and it's not an actor in a global world politics and not in the international relations. The reason being, the Caliph is absent. Muslims or Muslim Ummah, the global Islamic nation, do not have their representative. Islamic world today is divided into many states, and all this division is the result and the outcome of the time of the Western colonialism. And as a result of the colonial attempt to replace traditional Muslim social structures with the European model, the result of it is the collapse of many states such as Afghanistan, such as Libya, such as Iraq, and the last one being Syria. And as a result of it, we have an appearance of the terrorist group, those who like to call themselves Islamic State, ISIS. However, the truth is there is no such thing as Islamic State in which sovereignty would belong to Sharia, Islamic State which would represent the Ummah, the Islamic nation in the world. Such Islamic State does not exist, and this is the reason why we say Islam today is not in a state of war with the rest of the world. The only problem is that we have some Muslims, in fact many Muslims, in this situation of chaos and disorder in a Muslim world. They do not see a constructive way of solving their problem, so they turn themselves to the destructive one, such as terrorism. Now, the problem in defining Islam through war and peace, it implies defining Islam by means of its relationship with the terrorist attacks. However, one thing we must remember is that the terrorism, the way we understand it today, is a modern phenomenon, and we can say a relatively new phenomenon. And it was not Muslims who initiated terrorism, because it was not Muslims who initiated French Revolution, and it was not Muslims who were responsible for the crimes of communism. And because Islam was long here before the phenomenon of terrorism appeared, it does not make sense to try to define Islam through its acceptance or rejection of terrorism. And when we try to define Islam, we must do it first of all not to find a justification or trying to be apologetic in front of the rest of the world, and it does not help, because the one who is being apologetic already de facto accepted his guilt. No, rather when we try to define Islam, we must find this definition of our deen for ourselves. We must ask ourselves, what does it mean to be Muslim? And the truth is that Islam in its authentic, in its classical definition, is explained as al-istislamu tam, the complete surrender the absolute submission. Of course, the haters of Islam would like to present it as violation of the principle of there is no compulsion in a deen. However, as we know, the whole history is the proof that in the land of Islam, in the land of Darul Islam with the Islamic governance, the communities of Jews and Christians were living in these lands in peace, and nobody was forcing them to abandon their religions. Thus, when we say Istislamu Tam, the complete submission, it does not imply by any means compulsion in the religion. What is the meaning then of this expression, the classical definition of Islam, al-Istislamu Tam? It can be described as a consequence of realization by a human being that he is mortal, that he is limited in space and time, and the same is true for the world he lives in. And after a human being realizes it, then there is a choice to ignore it and continue living like nothing happened, doing business as usual, or he can ask himself a question: what am I doing in this world? Why I have been placed in this world? And after this human being, through the messengers of God, once he finds the answer, then he must show submission to the truth and surrender himself to the will of God. This moment he becomes Muslim, the one who submitted himself to God. And only through this, through Islam, through submission and surrendering himself to the will of God and to the law of God, he can obtain the state of peace, the peace with himself and the peace with the reality. So, when we say about peace, it comes through submission, not other way around. When we start by proclaiming that Islam is the religion on peace, but in the end of the day, we find ourselves being submitted to the modern discourse and to the media agenda when we repeat Islam is not a terrorism, Islam is against terrorism, but nevertheless this negation today is ignored, and the only thing which is left in the memory of the public is that Islam somehow linked with terrorism. So let us as Muslims abandon this dialectic which has been imposed upon us, and let us define ourselves not by means of negation, but by means of affirmation, through submission and surrender to Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth.